When we have athletes where their hips rotate and their shoulders rotate at the same time, that's where the graph would look something like this, to where the hips are rotating. Okay, so for hip and shoulder separation in kinematic sequence, this is separation in sequence. What we're looking at is when the hips hit their peak rotational speed. So as we zoom in here, again, the video is a little blurry, but we're all right. So right here, we're seeing those hips are basically at their peak rotational speed there, right? And we're also able to see that arm is still behind us. We can see the baseball there. So what that means is our hips have rotated while our shoulders are back, which means our core is still storing that rotational energy. So what that would look like on a graph, if we had the hips represented in green, is they rotate, they hit their speed, and then they decelerate. And then we have our shoulders, which we're going to represent with this red line. They start to rotate, they hit their peak speed, and then they deliver. So if I'm going to draw that out again, let me go back to the green, is what we're seeing is our hips start to rotate. So now what we're seeing is that graph is coming up in green, and then they hit their peak speed right there. So that would be the peak of this right here, and then they have to decelerate to stop that energy. And then go back to red for the shoulders, as we see the shoulders start to rotate here. So now that would look like this. They're starting to rotate. They haven't quite hit their peak speed. And now they've hit peak speed because they have to start getting into that deceleration phase. They're going to come down. And then what we would see is the arm and the ball and everything come with that as well. So if we threw the arm in there as yellow, that would be, the arm starting to accelerate here now. We're starting to get into that layback. So now we see the arm start to accelerate. And then right there at ball release is obviously going to be our peak speed. And then that has to decelerate. So that's where we're seeing, hips in green, shoulders in red, arm, ball in yellow to kind of simplify this whole thing. So we want to see those with that clear separation. When we have athletes where their hips rotate and their shoulders rotate at the same time, that's where the graph would look something like this, to where the hips are rotating and then the shoulders are going to go with that, right, stacked on top, where they're both hitting those peak speeds at the same time. Pretty common mistake in most throwing athletes until they start training that. So this athlete here, when he started, he was doing that, but we started designing those drill packages in the training program for his core to really maximize what he was doing.